This is the DAR Today podcast, and I'm your host, Brooke, Bullmaster Stewart. Well, did you know that the day that this episode is premiering, March 3rd, is National Anthem Day? We as DAR members so often have the joy of singing the National Anthem because of our frequent meetings, but how many who are not DAR members get that honor and that joy to be able to sing our National Anthem? It's not just a song that's played at random. And you may notice that here at the DAR Today podcast, we don't ever play the national anthem here on the podcast because we're firm believers in the protocol that surrounds the playing of this song, this very special song in our country. So we won't play that on this podcast, but it is a wonderful thing to think about today, to remember our national anthem and remember the freedoms that we hold so dear in this country. Well, today we have a wonderful story about a dazzling daughter. She is a DAR member, and of course we call them dazzling daughters. And so that'll be on this podcast today. We'll also have quite a few announcements from all over the place. And we also are going to talk about some of the work of our chapters all across the country. So I'm excited to show you that. But before we get into our episode today, just a quick reminder to subscribe to this podcast, to share it with your chapter members, with your friends, your family. We just got a comment last week from somebody who said, this is the first time hearing about the podcast. So we're just so happy you're here. Doesn't matter when you found us or where you found us. We're happy that you're a part of it now. And all of our past episodes are still online, waiting to be listened to or watched. So many of the stories on our podcast are just the right length to be able to supplement in your chapter meetings, especially if a scheduled speaker has had to cancel last minute. So be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And hey, as always, thank you so much for being here with us today. So to start off our announcements today, if not exactly breaking news, it's certainly exciting news. A new source of service for Connecticut has been established. According to an act of legislation passed on the 11th of October in 1777 and published in Hoadley Public Records of the state of Connecticut, an oath of fealty was required to make a land transaction, thus making it an acceptable source of patriotic service. But please be aware, because the legislation that authorized this service was passed on the 11th of October 1777, any land transaction you wish to consider a possible service source must date after the 11th of October in 1777 and before the 26th of November in 1783. A copy of the legislation is available in the link below in the show notes. Now in its 6th year, the NSDAR Junior Membership 5K is one of the most important fundraising opportunities for the Helen Pouch Memorial Fund. Grab your chapter members, family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, pets, etc., and make sure to register for this year's event. Regardless of if you're able to compete in the virtual race, your registration and generous donations ensure the National Junior Membership Committee is able to execute projects including support of DAR schools, the National Junior Committee Project, and the Classroom Grants Program. For NSDAR members, all donations made through this race portal will count toward NSDAR giving, including Heritage Club levels, 1890 Annual Giving Circle, etc. Please ensure you accurately list your national number to ensure you get proper credit. Your support of this event is so appreciated. Events like this are an excellent way to connect with others while supporting women in American history. In a now famous letter written by Abigail Adams, she urged her husband John Adams to remember the ladies. Each year of the Wright administration, the virtual 5K will highlight the unique contributions of women to the American Revolution. This year, we're excited to bring to light the story of Eleanor Delgado, a Spanish-American patriot who sold her cattle to help feed Bernardo de Galvez and his troops. We can all look forward to the Junior Committee sharing more about Leonor's story as a part of the event. Now remember, this is a fundraiser. While walking, running, or biking the 5K is encouraged, it's not required. And of course, most of us love bling. The medals have been designed with the 3-year race theme in mind. When placing this year's fan-shaped medal with the last 2 years' medal, they'll form a circle. So if you're trying to collect all the medals in the Remember the Ladies series and missed past years, then you'll want to register for one of the Back in Time races. This will be the last chance to go back and collect these medals, so don't miss out on the chance to complete the set. The 2023 race honored Polly Cooper. The 2024 race honored the Edenton Tea Party. Now you can pick up your medal at Continental Congress this summer, or it will be shipped to you. As part of registration, a medal holder is available as an add-on. The holder will allow you to display the 3 race medals together. Once in the holder, the medals can be proudly displayed. I'm really looking forward to putting these medals together. I think that'll be fun. If you want to show your pride in junior membership, you can order a race shirt or an adorable pet bandana. Now go get on it. Registration opened on March 1st, and I know the states have quite a competition to see who will get the most registrations. You know, on this podcast, we always strive to talk about what the DAR is doing today in your communities. To that end, we were so impressed with a few things put out in the incredibly informative Stars and Stripes newsletter, and we wanted to share those with you today. Fall of 2024 was certainly a literacy fest for the Jeptha Abbott chapter in Pennsylvania. At their opening September meeting, they dedicated their first Little Free Library at a local preschool. At the September Chair Fair, they promoted their upcoming literacy service meeting for October. Their October meeting included a speaker about dyslexia, where they compiled supplies for dyslexia students at Heinemann Settlement School. The chapter members all wore red, as it is the color for dyslexia awareness. Over 40 kits were sent to Heinemann, thanks to the joint work of Margaret Bluefield, Literacy Chair, and Pat Thomas, DAR Schools Chair. Incredible job, ladies. The Jonathan Dayton chapter honored Patriot Philip Negley with a grave marking at Germantown Union Cemetery in Germantown, Ohio. Proclamations were presented by Mayor Terry Johnson and German Township Trustee Jake Stubbs. Honor Guard participants and CAR members Kiran and Jash Patel wrote of the itchy wool and linen uniforms in the sweltering heat, reminding them of the history they were remembering, the significance of their roles, and the pride they felt in being a part of something honoring the formation of our country. After the ceremony, the Veterans Museum in Germantown hosted a tour and reception. And ooh la la, 37 members and prospective members of the Mary Isham Keith chapter in Texas gathered for a party to celebrate the 125th anniversary of the DAR in the 1900 Paris Exposition, part of the chapter's Flat George Washington Commemorative Events Tour. The Paris-themed event also served as the chapter's kickoff for their 2024-2025 community service project, benefiting Fort Worth Cook's Children's Hospital epilepsy patients. Donations of backpacks, games, coloring books, and stuffed animals for children to use during hospital treatments and visits to the epilepsy unit were collected. The first donations for this ongoing chapter project were delivered last September. Now over in Washington, the State Society DAR Chapter Regents Club East-West Project brought together 18 chapters to create 3 separate sites honoring Patriots and the coming semi-quincentennial celebrations. It took over 2 years of planning, 4 dedications, 5 businesses, 1 association, a myriad of volunteers, 400 emails, more than 40 Facebook posts, and at least 150 phone calls, and 15 meetings in person and Zoom, and selling nearly 600 Patriot bricks to complete these projects. Phew! It was called the CRC East-West America 250 Project and incorporated a marker in Lakewood, a marker in Seattle, and one in Spokane Valley. With all our chapters and state societies do, isn't it amazing sometimes when we come across people who have never heard of the DAR? Let's be sure that no matter what we do in our chapter work, no matter how small we may think it is, let's be sure to put out the good news via social media, your local newspaper, whatever it is. Don't hide those good things under a bushel. Let those accomplishments sparkle for all they're worth. And speaking of sparkling, next up, we've got an incredible story of a dazzling daughter who did something no one expected a woman could do. Well, buckle up because this is a doozy. Let's talk about the story of Emily Warren Roebling. As the Statue of Liberty rose on its pedestal in New York Harbor, an equally impressive monument had just been completed on the eastern side of Manhattan Island. The Brooklyn Bridge was completed in 1883, originally called the East River Bridge. The construction of the bridge began with a freak accident. In late June 1869, Prussian engineer John Augustus Roebling, the celebrated designer and builder of wire rope suspension bridges, was surveying the site for his new project in Lower Manhattan when an approaching ferry crushed his foot against some wooden pilings. As there was no bridges yet connected to Manhattan, there were hundreds of ferry crossings between Manhattan and its surrounding cities daily, making the shorelines packed with the hustle and bustle of constant boats. Well, John Roebling died of tetanus 3 weeks later, and the job of chief engineer went to his eldest son, Washington Roebling, who had been his father's right-hand man for construction of the great bridge spanning the Ohio River at Cincinnati, as well as on the design of this new bridge. Washington Roebling's wife was Emily Roebling, and she is the focus of our story today. Emily Warren was born in Cold Spring, New York, the second youngest of 12 children. Her father was Sylvanus Warren, a New York State Assemblyman. Wife, mother, lecturer, student, world traveler, and DAR member, this multifaceted Victorian woman was a pioneering example of independence. Despite advice in early years that women needed no higher education, she studied mathematics and science at Georgetown Academy, and later on, at the age of 56, she obtained a law certificate from New York University. But let's go back to her youth. In 1864, she traveled to see her brother, Governor Warren, at an Army camp where he was serving as commander of the 5th Army Corps. During her visit, she met a dashing young officer named Washington Roebling, who immediately fell in love with her. After 11 months of constant correspondence, she and Roebling were married. And as we mentioned, Washington had been working on this East River Bridge project between Brooklyn and Manhattan with his father, and after the war, his father sent Washington and Emily across the Atlantic to research caissons, the immense underwater structures filled with compressed air that were then transforming the construction of suspension bridges from London to Prague. Now, 3 years later, with construction well underway on what would be the longest, largest suspension bridge in the world at that time, Washington himself became incapacitated, paralyzed by decompression sickness, or what we now call the bends, while working in the caissons for the bridge piers deep beneath the river's surface. It was not yet understood what this constant and rapid descending and rising in deep waters could do to the body. Over 20 other workers died in the construction effort, many of them from the same condition. Well, with Washington Roebling confined to his sick room and fearing he wouldn't live to finish the project, Emily began taking down copious notes on what her husband had said remained to be done. She also began studies of her own on the technical issues, learning about strength of materials, stress analysis, cable construction, and calculation of catenary curves. Every day, she went to the site to convey her husband's instructions to the workers and to answer questions. She kept records, answered the mail, and represented her husband at social functions. Eventually, she became so good at this that many suspected she actually was the intelligence behind the bridge. Now, interestingly, if you were watching the TV show The Gilded Age, you may remember there was an episode on there that mentioned this story of Emily and what she did. Well, to go on with our story, in spite of Washington Roebling's debilitating illness, the Roeblings continued to lead the project thanks in part to Emily's persistence. When the Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, it was Emily Roebling who rode with United States President Chester Arthur across the Great Bridge, holding a rooster, by the way, to symbolize victory. At the opening ceremony, a Roebling competitor, Abraham Hewitt, known as the father of the New York subway system, said of her, and I quote, "The name of Emily Warren Roebling will be inseparably associated with all that is admirable in human nature and all that is wonderful in the constructive world of art," end quote. He called the bridge an everlasting monument to the self-sacrificing devotion of a woman and of her capacity for that higher education from which she has been too long disbarred. Now, so that you can know the full scope of what Mrs. Roebling helped accomplish, here's a few interesting things about this bridge, and tell me after you hear of these things if you can imagine overseeing a project like this even today. In dealing with the caissons, think about the knowledge needed for something like that. Workers sinking 2 massive watertight chambers deep into the river's floor, then adding pressurized air inside, as we said, to allow underwater construction of the bridge's foundation. The 2 bridge towers on top of those caissons were taller than most New York City buildings at the time. 4 main steel cables connected the towers, but these cables were created with 3,515 miles of wire wound around each other thousands of times. From these 4 cables, more than 1,000 suspender cables were connected to the bridge floor. The Brooklyn Bridge was the first bridge to be coated with metal zinc to protect it from rust and the first to have electric lights. Just thinking about this achievement, finishing this bridge, can you imagine Emily's bravery, the strength she must have had and displayed to finish a task like this? If you've ever stood at the bottom of the bridge, you feel absolutely minuscule compared to this behemoth above you, don't you? What would she have felt like helping create a project like this? Well, after the bridge was completed, Emily Roebling moved to Trenton, New Jersey with her husband and managed the construction of their mansion. I can't imagine what a fantastic relief that small project must have been. She also assumed an active social life, taking on important roles in the DAR, also in the Huguenot Society and other civic organizations. She traveled extensively, attending the coronation of Nicholas II in Russia, and was presented to Queen Victoria in London in 1896. She also served as both a nurse and construction foreman at Montauk, Long Island camp, established to house soldiers returning from the Spanish-American War. In the abstract for her book, Silent Builder, Emily Warren Roebling and the Brooklyn Bridge, author Marilyn Weigold states, and I quite agree, and I quote, "Emily Warren Roebling's career as a silent builder and organization woman was terminated by death in 1903, but her achievements, not the least of which was the Brooklyn Bridge, have endured," end quote. How proud are we, as members of the Daughters of the American Revolution, to have someone of Emily's talent and abilities counted among our number. She truly was a dazzling daughter. The quote we leave you with today was actually what was written on the plaque at the base of the Brooklyn Bridge, honoring all 3 Roeblings. It reads, "Back of every great work, we can find the self-sacrificing devotion of a woman." Well, thanks for listening, and be well, dear friends. Let's celebrate the Stars and Stripes forever, and remember, with all of your ancestors behind you, you are the result of the love of thousands. Well, this podcast was written and produced by our incredible team of writers and editors, and we are, as always, so grateful for President General Pamela Edwards Rouse Wright and Historian General Suzanne Heskey for their constant guidance, to Janet Westbrook and her work with the Stars and Stripes newsletter, and to Jennifer Pond and Hilary Fisk for being so generous with their time. The National Society Daughters of the American Revolution is a nonprofit, non-political, volunteer women's service organization dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and securing America's future through better education for children. Members are all lineal descendants of those who supported the cause of independence in the Revolutionary War. For more information, please visit dar.org. This is the DAR Today podcast.